Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last TIFF press conference for 2011. Before we bring out the cast of page 8, just a couple of quick notes. We're going to have 1 minute of flash photography with them standing in front of the chairs here, and then we ask photographers to move back. No flash photography during the press conference. And members of the media, please stand and introduce yourself and the name of your media outlet before you ask a question. Everyone, make sure your cell phones are off. And once again, this press conference is being streamed live at www.tiff.net/festival. And it is now my great pleasure to welcome the director and the lead actor of Page 8, as well as our moderator, Cameron Bailey. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the press conference for Page 8. My name is Cameron Bailey, the co-director of the Toronto International Film Festival. We're very pleased to have with us this morning the writer and director of the film, David Hare, and the star of the film, Bill Nighy. They've just come in from London to present the film tomorrow night at our closing night. We're very pleased that the film is closing the festival. We want to spend some time taking your questions, and I'll just give a brief introduction of the two gentlemen. David Hare, of course, being one of Britain's most important voices in the theater and also for the screen. He has directed 3 feature films from his own screenplays, Weatherby, Paris by Night, and Strapless, and also 3 original films for television, Licking Hitler, Dreams of Leaving, and Heading Home. Also has written screenplays for Saigon, Year of the Cat, directed by Stephen Frears, Plenty, directed by Fred Skepsey, Damage, directed by Louis Malle, and The Secret Rapture, directed by Howard Davies. Of course, also screenplays for The Hours and The Reader. He's the author of 27 plays for the stage, 16 of which have been presented at the National Theatre. His latest play, South Downs, will be seen at the Chichester Festival this year. Welcome, David Hare, Sir David Hare. Bill Nighy won a BAFTA Award and a London Film Critics Circle Award and an Evening Standard British Film Award for his performance in Love Actually. I think that was where many North Americans first discovered your work, Bill. Of course, he'd been working for many years before that. His more recent films include Wild Target, The Boat That Rocked, which reunited him with Richard Curtis from Love Actually, Valkyrie, The Constant Gardener, which earned him a British Independent Film Award nomination, Lawless Heart, Still Crazy. Of course, many people have seen him, although they might not recognize him from his work as Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And of course, he's done a lot of voice work for animated features, including Flushed Away. Much work on television as well, working several times with director David Yates. He is one of the most protean actors. He can play anything from a burnt-out rock star to a secret agent, and we're very pleased that Bill Nighy is here with us this morning as well. Welcome to both of you. David, I'll start by asking you about the genesis of this project. You've done a lot of work in the theater, especially examining British institutions, the church, the Labour Party, and now MI5. Can you talk about what drew you to that?
Yes, good morning, everyone. It became sort of obvious to me that, John le Carré is the great master of writing about spies. But he's really written about the Cold War, and since then he's been writing about international subjects, and that nobody had written about what's been going on inside our security services, which crudely is that since 2001, and then since the invasion of Iraq, they've been asked to do all sorts of things that they're not entirely comfortable with doing. And it became clear to me that by talking to various people in MI5, that it was a very rich subject for drama. And in particular, we had allies who were doing things which in our country are illegal, meaning practicing torture, detention, rendition, all of which are against the law in Britain, and we are in Britain, in theory, not meant to be complicit in torture. And this was creating great problems within the British security services, and I thought it would be a very interesting subject to write about.
And how much access did you actually have to what went on in MI5, or how much was just speculative?
It's mostly speculative. I'm sure everybody inside MI5 lied to me, why wouldn't they? And I'm sure they're terribly happy with the film, and I'm sure it completely misrepresents what's going on, and that I've been sort of brilliantly misled. But they're not telling me that. They're telling me, obviously, you know, it's the first film on this subject, I think it would be fair to say, that no other film's been made on this subject.
Bill, we see so many spies in the movies. They are often running around, jumping over things, shooting guns, but the spy that you play is quite different. He is a man who is a manager, and a manager of people especially, and a man who has to understand how to observe and read people very well. Can you talk about how you approach the character of this particular spy?
Yeah, the days of me running around jumping over things and shooting people could be coming to an end. So I was relieved when I read the script and I wasn't required to jump over anything, particularly jumping over anything. That's the killing people's not such a big stretch. But no, I've worked with David Hare all my life, and I've worked with him more than I've worked with anyone else, and it's very important to me, my association with him. And this script was one of his finest, in my view, and I get to play this wonderful role. And as you say, and it is a very important, it's an important film in terms of the world and in terms of Britain, obviously specifically, but because of this relationship now between governments and the intelligence service, where the intelligence service are supposed to provide not so much the truth, just stuff that accommodates whatever policies the government currently have going. It's deeply alarming, and the corruption is tremendous, and it will inform our lives in the most serious and damaging way. But I got to wear a very nice lounge suit and a dark blue overcoat, which is kind of important to me. People have commented on the fact that there's an absence of classical work on my CV, and that's basically because I used to joke about this, but it's for real. It's because I can't operate in those kind of trousers. And David knows me very well.
He knows the fit of your trousers.
Quite. Well, not that well.
The costume was specified on the first page of the script as a way of hooking Bill in. You know, as soon as it said he's wearing a well-cut suit and a blue coat, I knew I had him for the part.
You also have assembled a terrific cast around Bill, Rachel Weisz, and Judy Davis, Michael Gambon, many terrific actors who are playing largely supporting roles. Can you talk about assembling the cast, and Bill, if you could just talk a little bit about working with the actors in this particular work?
We were extremely lucky, and it's because of David that these people will come. And to have Ralph Fiennes come and play a relatively small part in his terms, and Rachel Weisz also, it was a coup for all of these people to come and join us. Sir Michael Gambon, who is officially my hero, he is the one senior actor. I'm running out of seniors, but you know, the man up ahead who you aspire to being like. It's always, I hesitate. I don't know why I hesitate. He's a genius. And it was tremendous that he should come and play a relatively small part. This cast is extraordinary, and it is, I think, entirely a credit to the fact that they will run there because it's David.
Well, it's hard for me at the moment to make films. You know, it's very, very difficult to make films at the moment that are about human beings. You know, there's been a sort of perfect storm in Hollywood, whereby the kind of film that I want to make, films like The Hours and The Reader, are now much, much harder to make than they were at the time we were making them. In fact, while we were making The Reader, various studio folk said to us, this kind of film will never be made again at this kind of level. And so if films about people are to be made at all, they have to be made very, very cheaply. You know, this film cost $3 million, and it was made in 5 weeks. And they have to be made through the goodwill of everybody concerned. But the interesting thing is the actors are as fed up with this situation as we are. In other words, you know, you don't get Ralph Fiennes to come along and play what is essentially a 10-minute scene, except for the fact that he can't get to do what he wants to do as an actor unless he comes along and does it under these conditions. And so everybody's very dissatisfied with how hard it is now to make films that are based on people's lives and not complete fantasies. I mean, one of the things you're mentioning about the violence, you know, I personally don't believe that MI5 knocked people off. I think they may have once or twice colluded with other people who do kill people. But, you know, one of the challenges is to make a suspense film in which there are not implausible killings. I mean, the death rate in modern movies is just absolutely unbelievable. I mean, if life were like the movies, there would be nobody left alive on this planet at all. You know, it's not unusual to see 100 people die in a shot these days. And so to make suspense films where nobody comes through doors with guns, it's so refreshing.
I want to go to you. I have many other questions for you, but are there any questions from the floor before we continue? All right, then I wanted to ask, yes?
Hi there, Mark Medley, National Post. This is mostly, I guess, for David, but as somebody who works in various mediums, when you start in a new project, how do you determine where it's going to fit best, you know, stage play or film or TV?
Well, this was wholly a film idea, you know, because there's a tradition of British spy movies, and in a way there are things that in the film that are a sort of homage to the films of the 1960s, which I grew up in and loved. Films like The Ipcress File, which I adored, and it has that feeling. I wanted this to be a movie, but, you know, it's presented to me, you know, same thing about aging. Essentially, when I gave it to the producer, they said, look, you can either have it made as a movie, and the average gestation period of a movie from the moment you conceive the idea to the moment it hits the screen is now 7 years. And I went, now what age will I be when that, you know, by the time we raise the money? Or you can make it for television, and it'll be seen at once. It'll be made at once, and it'll be seen at once. And, you know, it was screened on the BBC at the end of August, and it broke the records for the best, you know, the most watched drama in 5 years on BBC Two. And so you do feel the joy of reaching a big audience like that.
Was there also an element of wanting to reach that wide audience because the issue was so urgent and the moral dilemma that you explore was so important, to have it actually on Britain's largest media institution, the BBC? Was that also an element?
Yeah, I mean, of course, politically, it's far better to show it on television. Aesthetically, it's a movie, and of course, I would love it to have been a movie. And so coming here for it to be the closing gala at Toronto is not just an incredible honor for us, a little television movie, to come here, but it's also aesthetically, it looks wonderful. I've seen it in an 1,800-seat cinema, and it looks fantastic. And so artistically, because it's shot by Martin Ruhr, who is a great cameraman, and because it features all these wonderful performances, it's just such a joy to see it. It's like letting the animal out of the cage, you know.
Let me ask you one more before we go back to the audience. You mentioned the political value of the film and the impetus in terms of what you wanted to explore. And I guess I'm curious about how that worked now in 2011 when it went out. The events that you are describing happened many years ago. There's been an election, there's a new government in Britain now. There is a feeling, I think, among some people that we've moved on, but have we moved on?
No, and I don't think the events that it's describing are. No, not at all. It's, you know, the practices that are described in the film are still going on today. It's true that, you know, the Iraq invasion of 2003 was traumatic for Britain, as it was traumatic for a whole number of countries, and it raised issues But the issues it's raised have by no means been resolved. It's completely contemporary, I think.
Can you talk a little bit then about the debate that the film might have sparked once it was released? How does it engage with what is going on now in Britain's politics?
Well, I think that we're facing exactly what Bill's talking about, which is the security services are enraged because they feel that their job is to objectively analyze intelligence. It's not to tell governments what they want to hear. And yet Western governments at the moment have an agenda where they're asking security services to feed them stuff that will bolster their predetermined case. And so they feel very compromised by what's happening. And these issues are hugely contemporary. There are scandals at the moment about MI6 in Libya, which have broken since the film. And, you know, somebody who saw the film when it was transmitted on the BBC emailed me and said, "Did you write the next day's newspaper?" Because it appeared the front page of the newspaper was entirely about the things that page 8 are about.
Bill, this is a character that is part of a drama as opposed to maybe some of the more comic roles you've done. You've also done big Hollywood fantasies. Is there a different kind of approach that you take to your work creating a character like this?
I don't know about creating a character, really. I don't. Well, I understand what you mean, but no, there isn't any real. I mean, there are different technical considerations, and currently. I am looking to work less in a battle skirt or with tentacles or as a zombie or I am currently playing Jim Broadbent's dad in a cartoon, which is a stretch. I think he's at least 10 minutes older than I am. But you know, I mean those kind of roles. It is a relief for me to kind of more specifically express myself without sounding too la-di-da, and to have something. This is precious to me, this project and this particular film, and it was extremely, satisfying in the extreme for me, not only to be involved in something which concerns itself with one of the great scandals of our time, and with a film which contains crucial information, but that is told in the most elegant, beautiful way and contained within something which is properly romantic and concerns itself with the truth. You know, there are several people in the film at some point or other turn to my character because of his age and say, you know, that in some way, you know, the idea is that if you have an enthusiasm for the truth in this particular context, you are in some sort of way behind the times, which is a cute way of marginalizing you. It's bullshit, obviously. There is no, it's not a question of fashion, but it is as if the governments have become, you know, if politics has become a kind of extension of PR, you just look for stuff that fits. And the intelligence communities have, to some degree, collaborated. And there have been notable exceptions to that, MI5 being one of them with Tony Blair in Iraq. So the character is very satisfying for me, in all senses.
Now, so much of the pleasure of the work, although it's a beautiful film and it's visually quite rich, so much of the pleasure really is in the language as well. And I wonder, as an actor, to take David Hare's words and work with him, these wonderful scenes of exchanges where so much is said and unsaid, and how it's said, and the modulation of each word seems to really matter so much. Can you talk about doing that kind of work?
Yes, I relish it with all my heart. It's a thrill for me. It's what I'm in it for, is to deliver dialogue of this kind, because it is writing of the highest quality and order, but also in every way it contains, and great jokes. There are jokes in this movie, and I do my best. And they are successfully integrated into the, you know, blah blah blah. But it is very it's beautiful stuff to work with, and I've had the pleasure of doing it, you know, most of my life.
Other questions from anyone in the floor? You alluded to the fact that this kind of film is very hard to make, harder and harder to make, certainly at the studio level, and you have to watch your budgets these days. Is this a permanent condition that we're living in now, or do you feel like we're just going through a
I'm sure
stage?
new ways of financing films are going to be found. I think we're going to go to a sort of condo system where, you know, somebody will send you a thing and say, would you like to see a film about normal people that stars Bill Nye? If so, will you give £5 now and become an investor in it? And we'll all just press a button on our television, and then a year later we'll get to see the movie. My sadness is that I happen to have hit a bit of an artistic speed. I've just hit the desire to make movies again at exactly the moment at which movies are not being made of my kind. And so it's bad luck. And I come with no form. You know, I made movies in the 1980s. Which I always facetiously say each one was worse than the last, but they started quite high, to make it clear. I don't mean that they were. I don't mean that they were all terrible. I just mean that they did get progressively worse. There was a downward graph, let's say, which is not so unusual in film directors' careers. And so I gave up because it was depressing me. And somehow I felt ready to make films again. And it just turns out to be at a moment at which the studios and the financiers haven't got a new model for financing. But I'm sure they will find one, because you can see as electronic media expand and become more complicated, there will be democratic ways of financing films. I'm sure there will. But it's just bad luck to live in this little historical pocket where it's all so difficult. And one thing I should say is there was no economic reason to give up on our kind of films. It was pure panic. It was like a stock market panic. You know, films like The Reader and The Hours, which I cite only because I was involved, were in fact immensely profitable for those involved. Both those films made over $100 million worldwide. They're huge money makers. But unfortunately, those people who made those films decided at that point that 100 was no longer enough, that you had to make 200 or 300. And it was a panic decision. And it's obviously done the film industry a lot of damage, that decision.
There's also a complexity to the kind of films that you make that might be out of fashion as well. They are morally complex. Your characters are neither heroes nor villains, for the most part. And that's really not the norm in movies anymore.
I think that's absolutely right. And that unfortunately, you put your finger on it. That's right.
But I think also that I do think that the audience is underestimated, and I think that is a way of rationalizing making a certain kind of film, again, as a sort of panic. It's just trying to play the percentages, and the sole goal is to make as much money as possible, which I get. But the audiences are relieved, refreshed, flattered, and grateful if you give them anything that's complex and intelligent, and and is not formulaic. My experience both on television and in the cinema, if they're alerted to the fact is you need as much money as you needed to make the movie, to promote the movie, and therefore that's what sometimes with independent movies they come adrift, because you don't have that kind of money and people don't get to hear about it. They simply aren't marketed sufficiently. But when people do see them, as you see, all the hits, if you look at a lot of the cinema hits, they're always kind of described as unlikely or something. They don't contain stars. They make stars, maybe. All the British hits, no stars at all. They confound any of the marketing directives that people work by. They don't conform in any way to what you're supposed to be doing, and then they go and take $500 million or something. And it's some funky film from England. None of it makes any sense. Can I just take this opportunity just to thank. I just feel I should thank Rachel Weisz for coming to make this movie with us. It was such a great coup, as I've said, that she should come and join us. And to bring her wit and intelligence and commitment to this film made a great difference to us. And I just want to formally thank her for that.
That's just developing what Bill says. One of the great pleasures of working on this for television was that I never once heard anybody use the word character arc. Nobody ever said third act. I never heard all that hocus pocus nonsense that goes with Hollywood stuff. And personal journey, nobody ever mentioned their personal journey on this movie
I think
at all.
Did once. No.
And so, did you?
I was drunk.
think it's more about the trousers than the personal journey in any case.
Yeah, quite.
So the pleasure of making films cheaply is that at least you can make them free of the hocus pocus, you know, and you don't have to sit at endless meetings discussing personal journeys.
Now, from
Or
across...
likability, luckily, with Bill, you know.
From across the water, we look at British cinema, and it looks to us that there's a great renaissance happening. We're seeing your film this year. Of course, we've had Slumdog Millionaire and The King's Speech do tremendous business in terms of reaching a popular audience, but also filmmakers like Andrea Arnold, Lynn Ramsey, Steve McQueen do terrific work, which often plays very strongly at film festivals. So it's interesting to hear that even in Britain it feels like the possibilities are narrowing, because we're seeing tremendous films coming out of the country every year.
Well, a very famous American film director, whom I shall not name, once said to me, how do all these wonderful films keep coming out of Britain? And I said, how much are you paid to direct a film? He said, well, my fee at the moment is $7 million. I said, well, that answers the question for you, doesn't it? That there is something about adversity, and there's something about having to make the film and to concentrate in that way, which makes for a certain discipline. And Andrea Arnold, or any of the people you're talking about, struggles. It's very, very difficult to get to make the films they want, but you accept that that's what it's going to be. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you feel, David, an equal fluency in film and theater and in television?
No.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I suppose the way I know I'm not fluent in film is that I found myself boasting, and that's a deep sign of insecurity, isn't it? I just said to you, 4 million people or however many watched it on BBC Two. I would never say that about a play, because I would never boast about a play, because I would assume that a play was something I could do you know? But I've noticed it in all filmmakers. They always tell you how successful their film is. I met a fellow filmmaker at Heathrow yesterday, and he told me one by one how many stars he'd been given in each newspaper when his film came out yesterday. He entertained me in the lounge for some time by adding up his stars. And he's a very, very successful filmmaker. And I think, what is there about film that makes everybody so deeply insecure? And it is that thing that it's so completely unpredictable whether it'll turn out to be any good. And that is something deep in film that you don't feel in theatre. By and large, when you're rehearsing in the theatre, when you're in the rehearsal room, you all feel this is very good or this is very bad. And when it appears, if people don't realize it's very good, we will all know it's an injustice, and you continue to believe it. Whereas filmmaking, you have a horrible experience making it, and then suddenly, for no reason, everybody likes it, and you're completely bewildered. And so it's a very, very volatile medium that nobody really masters. There are no masters. I once objected to a obituary of a friend of mine which described him as an uneven filmmaker. And I said, oh yeah, name me the even filmmakers. Who are they? You know, Renoir made some complete dogs. Stanley Kubrick certainly made utter dogs. Steven Spielberg made dogs. It's a medium in which you make dogs and you make masterpieces. There is no even in it. And so that's why it's a heartbreaking medium and people get so obsessed with it.
This might be a bit simplistic, but is that partly why you're attracted to it, that uncertainty?
Well, I think I was beaten by it in the 1980s, so I'm going to fight a few more rounds now.
Good point. Can you talk a little bit about the projects that you have coming up? Bill, we've seen you in massive blockbusters, in smaller films. I think most audiences now want to see more of you, and perhaps without the prosthetics. What's coming up?
Well, having said that I wanted to work more regularly in a lounge suit, I've recently played a 22-foot giant in Jack the Giant Killer for Bryan Singer. I'm a milky-eyed demigod with a limp.
You can just leave that there.
Oh yeah. Check me out. I'm in Clash of the Titans 2. And I'm also in a film directed by John Madden with Judi Dench, Maggie Smith, Tom Wilkinson, Ronald Pickup, Penelope Wilton, and Celia Imrie, set in Udaipur and Jaipur, called The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. I say it slowly because there's a lot of words in the title. The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. I said it again. And that comes out soon. And I'm hoping to work some more with David.
And David, what will be coming up for you both on stage and on screen?
Well, I'm going to work with the National Film Board of Canada. I'm going to be animated. They're going to animate me.
It's true. This is true. He's going to be animated.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm curious.
Yeah. We're making an animated film. That's all I can say. It's something I've never done. And
Something nobody's ever done.
yeah. I'm going to put on this. What do I have to put on? Pajamas.
You have to put on a motion capture suit. And
Really?
yeah, try that for size. It's an exercise in humility.
Like Gollum or something. Be like that?
I wrote a monologue. Years ago, I wrote a monologue about visiting the Middle East, Israel and Palestine, called Via Dolorosa. And I followed it up a couple of years ago with something called Wall, which is essentially a description of what the wall is, that, again, I would think was more or less one of the most significant things to have happened in the last decade, the building of an actual physical wall between the Palestinian territory and Israel, a thing, again, which is rarely discussed and almost taken for granted. And the National Film Board of Canada have approached me about animating my trip along the wall, which I'm absolutely thrilled to do. But like all animated films, I think it will be many years before you see it.
Other questions from you? I want to follow up by asking a little bit more about politics and expressing political views in your work, which you, I think, have always done. Has the climate changed there in terms of what you feel resonates as you express your sort of either a political conflict or direct political opinions in your work?
I found that in this century, things are happening at such incredible speed. The world is changing so fast that if, like me, you've always admired Balzac and sort of felt Balzac was a kind of model of what a writer might do in terms of almost being secretary to the society and just keeping a record of what's going on so that people will be able in 100 years' time to go back and look and read your work and go, oh, that's how that felt at that moment. But in the last 10 years, things have changed at such incredible speed, and events have been so decisive that I've got involved almost in a kind of semi-documentary kind of work, particularly with Stuff Happens, which I think played here in Toronto, which was about the diplomatic process leading up to the war in Iraq, 2/3 of which was invented. I guessed what had happened, and 1/3 of which was documentary. It was from the record. And I think it's almost as if I'm writing so fast now in order to try and keep up with what's happening, I suppose.
And how is it received now? I mean, it feels to me that certainly in North America, there was a time in our recent history where I think there was more room for that kind of work, and that the debate continued. But it feels that certainly here, the space for artists to work politically, to express political views that are oppositional to the mainstream in their work is less and less resonant. There's less space for it. It doesn't hang in the air as long.
Yeah, well, if you do this kind of work, you're resigned to the fact that you're going to go in and out of fashion. And that kind of work is going to go in and out of fashion. But really, if you did work in order to be fashionable, what's the point, you know? So, yeah, I mean, there's tremendous hostility to what I do. And there are times when the hostility is very high, and there are times when the hostility is less. But that's the nature of that kind of work. If you do oppositional political work, you must expect the vagaries of fashion to ebb and flow around your feet. But that's not why you're doing it, is it?
And Bill, for you, is there a sort of a path that you have to walk, because you are working in quite large Hollywood studio films from time to time, and I know that there's a lot of caution there in terms of how the actors in those films articulate the brand of the film. So if you are to appear in a more directly political work like Page 8 and then to go and do a big Hollywood studio film, is there any nervousness there?
No, not really. I try and follow my nose. There's no plan, as you may have spotted. But I don't feel any kind of conflict there. I try and choose whatever the genre. You try and involve yourselves in things that have dignity. You know, whether they're children's entertainment or whether and how much money is involved is really not my affair. You know, mind you, it keeps us in trousers, but but it's not a problem in any way. I don't feel any kind of tension there. And the balance that I've been able to, well, it's not that I've been able to hit, it's rather that the balance that I've been given, the opportunities I've been given, it's very satisfying. It's a very satisfying mix.
Can I say something about that? I think that one of the extraordinary things about Bill is how many good things he's been in. And it's one of his incredible talents is for sniffing out good material. And he's one of those actors like, Dirk Bogarde or Mastroianni, where you go, oh, he turned up in a good, he's turned up in another, it turns out, and it's almost, it's a gift for detecting material. We had a wonderful television series called State of Play, which was then made into a movie, but was really the best television series of its time in Britain that Bill was in. Bill's consistently been working with Richard Curtis and Roger Michell and people like this. And it does seem to me it's a real gift. And it's tragic when you see actors who are actually brilliant actors, but who are not good at choosing material. But I think people like Bill and Rachel, obviously, and Rafe, have consistently had this incredible nose for being in good stuff.
How do you do that, Bill?
I go and see this woman. And she has runes and pebbles. No, I try and, I try and follow my nose is as good as I can explain it. And I think, it's just as I'm repeating that, but it's just to look for things that seem to be, they won't be a nuisance in the world. Things that you don't mind your child seeing, things that if you ever get grandchildren, you won't have to apologize for.
Things can change so much, though, from a screenplay that you read to the finished product. Are you trusting the director or the script or your agent, or what is it?
Are you out of your mind? No, I'm kidding. Yes, I do. It's a massive, it's a great leap of faith. But and everything's a gamble. It's all gambling. It's like being an actor is agreeing to be a professional gambler. And that's a way of looking at it. When young people come to you and say, I'm thinking about being an actor, you think, oh, right, so you want to be a professional gambler, because that's kind of one of the elements that you're going to involve yourself in. But but if the script is pretty good, then it will attract, hopefully, the right people. Everything comes from the script, and there are certain directors, and as you go along, you don't go and also these days, if anyone seems to have what they used to call baggage, I don't turn up. If there's anyone who has, whose manners might deteriorate as a result of the experience, I don't turn up. It's one of the luxuries of my life. I do see it as a kind of amateurism. If there's anyone who isn't consistently gracious, one of the great the great luxuries of my life is that I don't involve myself. It's as important as anything.
And there are still enough of those people with manners left.
Just about. There really are, actually. There are lots of, really good, smart. You don't have to be in trouble or something. You don't have to be, you don't have to behave badly. The equation that, he's a genius or something while he's screaming in your face, I've never believed in that equation. It doesn't fly with me. It's just a form of amateurism. Grow up.
Can you talk a little bit about choosing actors? I mean, I think it's true, as you said, Bill, that you probably have the luxury of great choice. A lot of actors, I'm sure, would want to work with you, but how do you select which ones you want in your work?
Oh, golly. I suppose with this film, then, to some degree it was working, it felt like family. In fact, Rachel, I had never even met. And Rachel came to me and said she wanted to do a play of mine. And I rather impudently had a script of page 8 tucked under my arm. And I said, well, it's a wonderful coincidence you want to do this play of mine, because I've actually got something that you could do. And it turned out that Rachel, whom I didn't know at all, had come into the theatre because of a performance of Bill's that she'd seen when she was a schoolgirl. She'd seen him playing Edgar in King Lear. And she said to me she didn't know that Shakespeare could be so rock and roll until she saw Bill. And that's what made her want to be an actor. So there was an immediate sort of affinity with her because it was history between us, so to speak. And I think this film has a family feel because a lot of actors who I haven't been able to work with for a long time, like Michael Gambon, who's been, as it were, part of my life again, it's because I haven't directed for a long time. One of the pleasures of directing again is to work directly with actors who you know and admire. And I don't find that working with people you already know is comfortable, or you're accused of, it's too easy that way. But if, like me, you're shy, it's actually a big advantage already to know somebody. You don't have to go through all those awful stages. And it's been a feature of my life that all the actors I've admired most, I've worked with more than once. I've worked with some of them over and over and over. In Bill's case, I think 6 or 7 times. And the great creative times with particular actors, Kate Nelligan, obviously, being Canadian, and Judi Dench, and people like this who I've worked with over and over. It's just got richer and richer each time because you start with a knowledge of each other and plan to go further if you possibly can.
Can I ask you about Ralph Fiennes and the character he plays in the film? He's a prime minister, but he's not Tony Blair. Can you talk about that decision?
Yeah, well, the way I put it to Rafe was, Rafe said to me, is the Prime Minister meant to be anybody in particular? And I said, he's intelligent, he's articulate, he's incredibly powerful, and he can beat anybody in a room, and he's also physically fit and devastatingly attractive. And Rafe said, oh, so he's not anybody who's been Prime Minister of England.
Nicely done. We are going to have to wrap up. If there are no further questions from the audience, I'll just ask you to please join me. Oh, there is a question? Yes, go ahead. Microphone's coming to you.
Over and above a question about your shirt, Cameron, I wanted to ask Sir David if he has an opinion about why these political things are expressed, it seems, only in the movies.
Why what?
Why these political opinions are coming through only in the movies.
Well, I don't know what the situation is in Canada, so I can't speak to it. But obviously, the British press and the American press had a catastrophic failure of confidence during the Iraq invasion, didn't they? They all, in 2003 was sort of the low point of the history of the Western press, I guess, because they all fell for it. I mean, even liberal newspapers like the New York Times, to its eternal disgrace, for which I believe it's never apologized, the New Yorker magazine supported the invasion of Iraq. So there was this moment of sort of intellectual squalor in the West, whereby suddenly an operation that certainly from the British point of view was extremely doubtful was supported by the major liberal organs of opinion. The Observer, absolutely, a traditional liberal Sunday newspaper. So there has been a sort of debasement, I think, in intellectual life in the West in the last 10 years. And there is also a sort of, we're standing like rabbits in front of the advance of the financial markets and the neoliberalism that supports the financial markets. And we're all standing there going, oh my God, I can see this is catastrophic, but I can't imagine anything else but this. And so this kind of complete rolling over in the face of global capitalism is sort of decimating intellectual life, except it seems, for some reason, in the movies and in the theatre, which is why I think certainly in Britain there's been a huge move back to people going to the theatre. The theatre is very popular and vital again in Britain. And yeah, you go to the movies to learn about these things.
Has the media not learned a lesson since Iraq?
Well, it's obviously coincided, hasn't it, with a period in the media's own decline, or newspapers particularly, and magazines decline in their own confidence, which I'm sure everybody in the room can speak to much more knowledgeably than I can, since you're personal victims of it. But the authority of newspapers has obviously suffered from the two things that it called one of the great issues of our time so wrong, and at the same time it's suffered a period of terrible economic decline for all the reasons of the rise of the new media.
Was there another question? No? In that case, then I will have to wrap up and just ask you to please join me in thanking David Hare and Bill Nye. The film is Page 8.